Bradshaw LeRoux Consulting has been around for about 22 years now. And just to give credit, our credentials as to why we are authorized to, or why we're sort of knowledgeable enough to cover this content, is that we're all about disability inclusion. And our focus is on disability inclusion in the workspace and in the economy. So essentially, all of our services are geared up towards creating an equalized platform where everybody can compete in the workspace particularly. So our main types of clients tend to be corporates and organizations who are wanting to drive a more disability inclusive culture and to be able to sustain that to the point where it just becomes business as usual. Our clients are also students, job seekers, and persons with a disability who are wanting to enter or excel or succeed or be promoted in the workspace. And then our clients are also our network of influence. We've got a lot of networks with people that are involved in disability empowerment and inclusion and equal rights and human rights. And all of us realize that that journey towards creating a culture which actually respects disability as a value-adding contributor to our economy, it requires a sort of multi-pronged ecosystemic approach. So all of us that work together, although we might come at disability inclusion from our own perspectives, we have the same common vision. So welcome to everybody. If you'd like to see more about Bradshaw LeRoux and what we do, you can always tap into our website after this and explore a bit, and you're welcome to chat to us and we can set up one-on-one conversations. Okay, but let's get on to the topic at hand. And that topic at hand is the impact of COVID in the disability world. Now, there's been a lot of information going out there around the human rights impact and the human rights element. And we've been fortunate enough to participate with a lot of human rights groups that are trying to get out there and understand what's really going on so that they can put forward strategies that will address some of the issues. But from our perspective, we are wanting to look at disability and its space in this existing and future world that COVID has thrust upon us at a much faster speed than we anticipated. I want to talk around some of the impact that we have personally experienced with our candidates and our job seekers and ourselves with a disability, because I think it's important to give context to why we need to shift when we forge on in this new business world that we're creating, why disability inclusion is so essential as part of our thinking. Okay, so just from our experiences, these are some of the key issues that the direct impact of lockdown and the coronavirus pandemic has had on persons with a disability. The first thing is limited access to carers, limited choice in terms of self-isolation, and also limited support networks. This is a very real concern because I know that for me, for example, I live independently thanks to my assistive devices, and I live in an estate, and I can generally manage day to day, but if something goes wrong with one of my assistive devices, I need a plan B. And the other day I wanted my mom to come and save me because one of my assistive devices had given up the ghost for the day. And we had a problem getting her access into the estate because the estate protocols of lockdown are that if you want somebody to come into the estate, you've got to fill in reams of paperwork, and you've got to make sure that they've got special licenses and they can produce these licenses and the security stamps. And it's a real rigmarole, which is all well and good unless you're dangling from the ceiling at 2 o'clock in the morning because your ceiling hoist has stopped working. So to try and get them to flex on that policy to allow access to her to my mother without all the relevant paperwork became quite a mission. Now that's me in my situation. So you can imagine out there, those people who rely on the support of friends and family and a network of people to assist that aren't formalized carers and aren't formally employed. That has become a real issue that we need to consider. So we need a degree of flexibility there when it comes to how we're going to allow people to have access to those resources. The obviously other concern is the higher health risk that persons with a disability may have. So given the fact that some people might have related healthcare issues, for example, I'm very healthy, but I don't have strong enough muscles to cough properly. So if I was to contract the coronavirus, then I would most likely need medical care. Now, if you look at the medical system in a disaster scenario, they have to follow a decision-making triage, which basically says that if you're kind of looking like you're not that strong, you may not get access to the medical care that you need because there's limited resources to share. So there's the concern there that if I get sick, then I'm obviously going to be a lot more predisposed to becoming very sick. Will I have access to medical care? And if I do get that medical care, how low down in the decision-making of the probability of recovering will I fall? And that's, again, just me. So take that out there in the communities where people don't have access to private health care. Aside from that, we might need to access healthcare for other reasons. So we might not have the coronavirus, but we have other related asthmatic or other related conditions. And with resources being tapped, like fully exhausted at the moment in the healthcare industry, are we going to get access to that medical care? So those are other issues that really need to be front of mind when we're formulating our strategies. Also, we have a look at the support that's offered at our educational facilities. Now, I'll just share an experience with you. We've got a number of bursary recipients that we have on a bursary management program that we run. And they have disabilities, and when it comes to having a use of assistive devices, up to now, they've relied on the libraries of the universities that have Zoom text, or they have larger screens or whatever assistive device that they need. Now, come lockdown, you suddenly have got to go home and you don't have access to these assistive devices. So a lot of the coaching and the sort of help that we've been providing is trying to find novel ways to get around some of these issues. And it might be that we are literally WhatsApp voice noting paragraphs out of textbooks to help the person in the meantime, to something a bit more advanced, like negotiating with your textbook sales bookshops to allow access from these students to go into an audio book version of the text material. So there are ways that we can get around this, but we've had to be very creative because there wasn't a lot of time to prepare. So for people who have access to educational issues and they need the support of an education system that don't have that anymore, the impact is going to be quite significant. If we also look at the fact that everybody right now is under a lot of stress, they're feeling very anxious, and there's a lot of uncertainty, routines have been turned upside down. Now, if you look at individuals who have psychiatric or mental disorders or behavioral disorders, where they have to try and them or their families have to try and manage a completely different dynamic. A friend of mine, her child has autism, and routine and structure is absolutely essential to his coping mechanisms and how he moves from day to day and sort of succeeds. And this has obviously been turned on its head. Now, fortunately, she's got a support structure to help her, but what about those families out there that don't have that support structure? It leads very much to the concerns over increased neglect or abuse that might emerge. So this is another thing that our strategic intent needs to consider when managing this disaster. We also look at inaccessible information. Now, I think most of us have experienced that when we've been trying to navigate the TERS and the different small business recovery systems, where we're trying to find out how to do this and how to do it correctly. You just exacerbate that by 1,000, and you've got somebody with a disability who isn't able to access that information in a format that they can read or that they can have access to. So it's been great that we've been trying to get a lot of information out there about wash your hands and, you know, how to stay safe. And we've been doing that in lots of different formats. But in terms of the actual, the relief information, how to go about applying for UIF and that sort of thing, it's not always been shared in an accessible format. I was very pleased to see that whenever our president comes on and he presents on TV, there is a sign interpreter. But then that information goes out there, and how much of that other information out there has been made accessible. So we need to consider that. From my perspective, and this is why this webinar for me becomes a key focus, is the reality is that people with a disability are going to be far more susceptible to losing their jobs over this time and to getting their jobs back again once our economy starts to sort of mobilize again and move in the right direction. I think my concern is that the disability inclusion agenda that has only just started to gain some level of priority in our organizations is suddenly going to drop down to the bottom of the pile again. And so for us, I'm very concerned. If you have a look at the extreme demand that's going to be placed on our social welfare system and our social grant system, my concern is that now you've got to share that pot amongst a lot of other people. And again, I'm concerned that the disability dynamic is going to be dropped in terms of priorities. So what do we need to do about this? Again, I said that there's a lot of people that are part of the human rights organizations that are doing fantastic work around trying to understand and address and mitigate the risk when it comes to some of the issues I've raised. But I think from our perspective, our focus is very much on how do we get businesses to recognize disability as a value add to our economy, because unless that connection is made, we're going to continue to see people with disabilities excluded from the economic sector and relying on the welfare of others to survive rather than being economically independent. Okay. I do think that it's been quite interesting how disability has become, we've all kind of just had a little snapshot of what it's like. We're all just experiencing what it's like to have restricted access to work, restricted mobility, the need to rely on other people to help us get things done, high levels of anxiety, and that feeling that our world has changed completely overnight and it will never be the same again. And I keep telling people, well, yes, this is the realities of a lot of people with a disability. And you're just experiencing it for the first time. You're quite novel at it. But the reality is that we're quite professional at it. And so we've got value to share in terms of how to get through this. And I've just highlighted a couple of things to make that point clear. Okay. And the slide is entitled Problem Solving is What We Do Best. And I think that if you think about the dynamics of a person with a disability trying to compete and succeed in a world that excludes, facing all the barriers that are in their way to success, and yet are still managing to come out on top in many situations, you've got to kind of respect the fact that that takes a bit of problem solving. So one of the things that we look at is things like we're all frustrated. We can't get to the office to work. We're on lockdown. We're at home. You know, it's just not an option for us. Now, this is not unusual for many mobility impaired people who face daily and multiple infrastructural barriers and transportation barriers. So a lot of the pushback we used to have from companies when we were trying to place persons with a disability is that we'd say, well, you know, given their dynamic, they can get to work, you know, once or twice a week, but it might be nice if they can work from home and have that flexibility. So for various reasons, they could either work at the office or at home. And up to now, companies have been like, oh, no, it's not our company policy and our IT protocols would never allow that. And no, we wouldn't be able to manage people's productivity. So that's not going to work for us. They must be able to get into our offices every day by 8 o'clock. And yet take a look what's happened. Suddenly, overnight, all those points of resistance have been turned on their head, and suddenly companies have found ways to allow this work from home flexibility. So it just shows us that some of the pushbacks and some of the resistance to the reasonable accommodation measures that we've been wanting to do wasn't about a lack of ability, but it was about not having the right motivation to push that on the agenda. And so here we are with those options opening up to us. I also have a look at things like we can't be around people in our bubble. I mean, I was at the shop the other day and somebody coughed and the entire store like stepped away from them and frowned at them. And I was having a real laugh because people have become very conscious suddenly of their bubble, their personal space. And that's a lot of people who have various psychiatric conditions and so on that need that bigger personal bubble. And suddenly that's become a reality for everyone and we start to notice it. So social distancing has entered the room and we are living that experience of needing that bigger bubble. Okay, so I think that that's something, again, and I'll talk about it just now, but that's something we can keep moving. I mean, what a pleasure if you have a phobia about contact and you need a bit more space. What a pleasure to go shopping now. You don't have to worry about being squished and bumped into by a lot of different people. And so what if we keep that going forward? What about if one of our checkout counters did keep to that social distancing respect space? That's something that it wouldn't hurt anybody, but it would be a fantastic opportunity to respect the fact that those who aren't comfortable have an alternate option. Okay. I also think things like the way everything is becoming online now. Your shopping and everything can be done efficiently online, cost effectively. Everything is being around, we'll bring the service to you, has been a huge leveler for a lot of people. And again, it's removing a lot of the barriers to inclusion that have previously excluded. The next point is the needing innovative solutions to achieve our objectives. We've got to think about how to do business differently. And you know, there's no one better equipped to do that than people with a disability. I mean, you've just got to see me when I'm on diet and my family put my chocolate on top of the refrigerator, and I can't reach it, and they do it for me. You must see the contraptions that I have devised. If it's not the barbecue tongs strapped to the broom handle with duct tape and a string so I can flick it up onto the top and scoop my chocolates off, I've come up with a million different solutions to problems that are no longer problems for me. And thinking flexibly, what people with a disability have had to do is they've had to be able to adjust the way they do things, little and often, to resolve problems and to be able to find an alternative to the way it's normally done. And I think that that's something in business more than ever. It's that kind of skill that we really, really need right now. The next thing is that it's been a real issue. You know, here we sit complaining that we can't travel, we can't attend conferences, we can't attend meetings, and travel and accommodation has become a real barrier for us, for everybody right now. And I chuckle and I think, well, yes, this is not unusual for a lot of people who are, for example, wheelchair users that travel a lot and have to think about every potential barrier from here to there. You know, you have to fight with the airline. You have to fill in a massive medical form for them to even let you on the plane. And then you have to fight for, you know, where you're going to sit, and if the quotas of people with a disability have been exceeded, so you can't go on that flight. And then when you get to your destination, is the hotel that you're staying at really wheelchair accessible? So those are all things that had to be considered and were potential barriers for all these global conferences. Now, I've just been invited to present at a global inclusion forum, which is going to be the first of, well, one of the first global conferences that has all been held online. So what a fantastic way to disseminate and get that information out to people in a professional setting without having to navigate the dynamics of travel. So that's just the logistics. Now let's have a look at some of the other value adds that persons with a disability can bring to our economy that we can learn from in the way we move forward. I look at determination and resilience. I think that, and a lot of you will be able to relate with it, you know, with me on this point. For those people that have acquired a disability, whether it be a suddenly acquired disability where they wake up and their life will never be the same again. They may not be able to walk after an incident that's happened, and suddenly the world is turned upside down for them. What about people who have a progressive disability? So they know that every week might bring a new challenge. These are all experiences that we are all feeling right now, that overwhelming fear that we know the world has changed forever. And I think one of the major lessons that we need to learn is that for those persons who have acquired a disability and those who have been able to be given a bit of a nudge, have those mentors, have those coaches, have those people who influence them positively. They've learned to understand that, yes, the world has changed forever. Yes, it is never going to be the same. But that doesn't mean to say it's going to be a bad world. It's just going to be a different world. All you need to do is learn how to navigate that effectively. And I think that we can learn lessons from a lot of people when it comes to that. And that needs to be shared with our employees who at this stage are actually just battling with the concept of massive change. From a determination and resilience point of view as well, just that impact that we're all concerned about our jobs. We're all concerned about how we're going to be able to add value to business. And all of that has just been bought because of one policy, one law that came in and said, business will now cease, full stop. Now, we've just experienced what it's like to have an organizational or a policy-based barrier that has prevented our ability to work. If I have a look at something like a health and safety policy, that is a blanket policy that says nobody with a disability can work in this environment because they're at high risk. Now, that is a one-size-fits-all that you can argue to the hills that that's not true. Not all people with a disability are high risk. It's a case-by-case decision-making thing, but it's the inflexibility of a policy that is going to have a negative impact on the world. And what we're what we're learning right now is we have to be flexible. We have to allow for a degree of change. And our president in South Africa last night saying to us, right, we're going to move to different levels of that flexibility, and you're going to have to just go with the flow, is a classic example of how we need to do that. Okay, I just want to end off with this last slide when it comes to the skills. I will tell you, we all talk about the power of positivity, and I'm not one of those people who believe that being positive can solve all ills or all negatives in the world, because there are some realities of things that just need to change. But I want to tell you, those candidates, those students that I've got on my bursary management program, we've been engaging with them every day to say, how are you doing? Sometimes it's just a person on the other end of the line that somebody needs just to pick them up through the day. And so we put a little competition out there. And the competition was to say, right, guys, we want you to take a photo and give us a little write-up of something that you've done in your existing environment, that's something that you've done differently to help you get through a barrier or something that might be, stopping you from getting something done. So it was a very positive little competition, and the winners were going to win some free airtime, and it was a great idea. And we had the most fantastic feedback. Our one candidate, which had me in hysterics, she had to buy electricity, and she had to reload electricity in her meter. But her meter is obviously placed very high up because of laws where it says that kids can't hurt themselves. And so she had to punch in a really long code, but couldn't reach her electrical meter. So she videoed herself with a broom handle and how she punched in this entire code with a broom handle and reloaded her electricity. So she got 10 out of 10 for determination. And there's been so many positive stories. I will tell you in my experience that I've had less grumbling and less grumpiness from our job seekers, our students, the people with a disability in our network of influence than I have from a lot of other people in our society. So I'm aware of time constraints. I need to move quickly on this. What can we do to do things differently? And I'm going to bring up a couple of pointers here, which I'll talk through. Okay. The first thing is we need to report human rights abuses, and that is something that's really important. I will be sending out or posting on our website as well some resources that you can tap into that are monitoring the rights of people with disabilities, so that we can make sure that human rights atrocities or contraventions or even risks are noticed and addressed. We also want to encourage persons with a disability to share their experiences as well. And there's various platforms to do that. One of them being the International Disability Alliance. They want to know what the on-the-ground experiences are like. So share your experiences, let people know, and make people aware of the fact that there are a lot of people out there who are willing to go to bat for you, but they need to know what the issues are. So just bear that in mind. The next thing we need to do is we need to look at our social system. And then I'm talking about our grants and our social welfare structures. We need to recognize informal carers and allow them to receive a grant income to assist persons with a disability, because that really is going to make impact. Remember, as a person with a disability myself, I need that grant because I need to buy food for myself and pay for rent. But the person who's helping me and staying at home, that sibling that is staying at home in order to help me, they also need to be able to be recognized for the empowering value that they're adding. Okay. The next thing I want to talk about is just offering individualized support. And I will tell you, through any business model that you're doing now and in the future, the thing about disability inclusion, and it's a key success factor, we need to create awareness on a broader structure. So the disability awareness training, the sharing of diversity messaging, showing how disability is just diversity, and after a while, all diversity just becomes normal. We just need to know about it. That's absolutely important. But another critical success factor, which we employ, is that every person with a disability that we engage with will have direct access to asking for specific and relevant information about their particular case. So we've got a system called ODIN, which allows, it's an online disability inclusion system, and it allows all of your employees or your learners or your grant recipients and your bursary recipients to be loaded on the system. And the other day we had one of those, I'll give you an example. They messaged and said, I'm on the Gautrain, my wheel has just literally fallen off my wheelchair. I'm going to be late for work. My manager's going to be furious. I don't know what to do. Can you help me? And we were able to mobilize and give her the contact number of somebody who could come and fix her wheel. We told her what to do with her manager, and we sort of disaster managed her situation. That allows her to be equipped with the skills in the future. It allows her to retain her income, to retain her job, and to get on with business as usual. So we've got to look at structures and strategies that include broad policies, broad awareness training, broad protection services, but also doesn't lose sight of communication methods where you can keep in touch with individuals in their specific scenarios. Okay. I'm going to just skip through now. The last thing I want to just talk on in this slide is to talk around the demographic. Don't exclude disability as a demographic in your market research. A lot of companies are going to be doing market research to say, how are our customers going to respond to our new ways of doing business? What do they want from us? How can we shift our business strategies and approach to feed into those new customer demands? And so there's going to be a lot of research that's going to be going out there. And I'm going to really ask, do not forget disability as a dynamic. I always have a chuckle when I go and they're doing in retail, and they're doing these surveys in retail to say, well, why did you purchase that product? And I always go, well, because I could reach it on the shelf. That's how I choose my brand. And it's nowhere on their market research form that they can put that dynamic in. So we need to recognize that disability is 15% of our world's population. It's a massive demographic. And you put their network of influence, and you've got a huge consumer pool that has completely been ignored up to now. So we need to start recognizing the value that disability has to bring to our business in the way we do business, in the way we strategize what our business is going to look like, and also in the way our consumers are going to be purchasing. Don't forget that demographic. Okay. I just want to touch on 2 points about how to apply our learnings of the value of disability. And all of this information will be on our website as well. But just to let you know, from our education system, I cannot overestimate how important it is to start thinking inclusively in the way we're remodeling how our education system is done. If I have a look at how many of my daughter's friends and my friends' children, how their schools have shifted straight away to doing online teaching. Now, what's fantastic about that opportunity is it really facilitates it really facilitates inclusive education, because you can have your large screen, you can have your assistive device, you can have your carer there to help you. There's a lot of of barriers that it removes. So when we are looking at our education model, you must remember that it's not only making it inclusive, looking at our online solutions, it becomes really, really essential. And it's not just going to benefit kids with a disability. I mean, how many of us have got children where the teachers have said, yes, well, your child tends to learn more visually than in writing. Well, what a fantastic way to get that out there through online teaching. And I know there's a lot of pushback that comes to say, well, yes, but we don't have access to Wi-Fi networks. But I will tell you that I've come across a lot of companies that are making that feasible. I was chatting to one of my colleagues the other day, and they were saying that they've developed a Wi-Fi hotspot solution, which costs $3 a day, and it can benefit families and communities. So all we need to do is invest a little bit in the infrastructural support, and we've got cost-effective and really applicable solutions to be able to access online learning, and we really need to look at that from an education perspective. It also is going to have huge benefits in terms of standardizing our level of teaching. Then your teachers become facilitators to make sure that that's happening in practice. Okay, if I also have a look at the businesses, we really have to tap into some new SME ideas if we're going to get persons with a disability really engaged, and youth as well. We need to look at models that will allow persons with a disability to compete in this new fourth industrial revolution world, which has really been accelerated given the coronavirus onset. So if I have a look, and it really saddens me that a lot of the tech hubs and business models for creating tech hubs to teach people coding and programming and so on, how many of them are popping up and they haven't even thought about disability as part of their model of learning. And that's something that we really need to address very quickly. Okay, I'm going to just move on because I know we're running short of time. Now, I'm going to bring up the last slide here, which is about what do we need to do as companies, as game changers, in order to ensure that the message of the value of disability to business and to our economy and to our society is going to get out there consistently. Obviously, I brought my Odin icon up here because we have such a solution, but it's whether you use Odin and our solution or whether you use your own internal platforms or another service provider, it doesn't matter. What needs to happen is that you need to have ensure that you have these components. Okay, you need to have a catalyst where that disability awareness training is disseminated, not in a sporadic once a year on-site training thing, but it's an ongoing and consistent way to get information out there. One of the things that we've done through Odin is we've got short 5-minute videos that pop up on your employees' computer screens, and they will tell you little learnings each time. So it might be on the impact of environmental barriers, and we'll explain what an environmental barrier is, why it impacts on exclusion, and then we'll give them a little exercise to do, to go and make a coffee at the local coffee machine in the office and to give it a try and see what barriers were there and what could they have done differently to shift that barrier and remove it. So it's designed to be impactful, relevant to all, and it's little and often points to ponder that start to shift people's thinking. We want people to stop seeing disability as a uniform social welfare demographic, and we want to start getting people to recognize the value that disability has to our society in itself. The next thing is, I say it again, you need to provide that individualized support and advice. So through Odin, a manager could message us and say, well, I've just got a new employee with a disability joining my team, and I'm not sure whether I can shake his hand. What do I do? And we'll give that advice. Or they're coming to work like every day, and I don't know whether it's a performance management issue or a disability related issue. So I'm not sure how to approach this, and we'll give them the information. Or it could be an employee with a disability that's saying, you know, I need help because my manager is not flexing and applying the reasonable accommodation measures he was supposed to put in place. It could also be an employee that says, well, my child's just being diagnosed with autism and I have no idea what to do. Can you help me? So that individualized support becomes an absolutely critical success factor. Okay. If I move to the next thing, which is the access to information and resources, again, what you want is you want a platform that is able to link solutions to demands. So we've got a wiki feature in Odin, for example, that says, well, you can type in, is epilepsy a disability? And it'll pop up the answer and it'll give you how to make that judgment. Or it'll say, I'm getting a pressure sore from working long hours and long shifts. You know, what are the solutions? And it will link you to a number of different bits of information around what is a good pressure sore cushion. How can you manage a pressure sore? Where do you purchase these assistive devices? So it's designed to link a solution with a potential barrier amongst persons with a disability. And that linking of resources becomes absolutely essential. That's why we connect with so many other individuals like EDEF. If I look at EDEF today, there's DIMS, furiously sign language, and they're going to beat me for talking so fast. But there they are helping us facilitate our communication. So a big shout out to EDEF, and thank you very much for helping us with that. These networks are so important because they help us give an inclusive solution which normalizes the value of disability. The next point is the central platform for sharing benchmarks. And again, we found that a lot of companies have great intention to get from A to B, but they are not actually achieving sharing that information. And so that becomes, again, absolutely essential. The ability, if you do an initiative in one branch of your company, and it works really well around creating awareness, make sure that you can apply that in a different section as well. And the last point is it's a way to gather real-time information to research and monitor data. Okay, I know our time is up, and I'm going to stop there because I'm a bit worried that although we upgraded our package, I'm a bit worried that we might be running out of time to connect with you guys. And I do want to allow a platform where we can ask questions. So we are going to be running a whole series of webinars that are going to be following every 2 weeks, and they're going to be short bits of information that will be relevant to your organization, and you're welcome to go on our website and keep an eye out as well. But in the meantime, I'm going to stop right there, and I'm going to ask if anybody has any questions at all. Now's the time to get them through to me. Dear, I can't see the chat feature, so I'm just going to stop sharing and see if I can get onto that. Okay.
Hi everybody, it's Deirdre here. I work with Lisa. If anybody would like to ask a question, you can either drop it on the chat feature, or you can unmute yourself, ask your question, and then if we can just ask you to mute yourself once again, and Lisa will answer that question for you. Thanks so much, guys.
Okay, I'm just having a look at the questions now. You're welcome to unmute and let me know if you have any other questions. I'm just looking at the chat.
Good afternoon. I have audio, but I do not have visual.
Oh dear. Alex, can you can't see my video at all?
Yeah, I don't know. For a split second, I had you, but unfortunately, I don't have visual anymore. But it's fine. I'm coping with just the audio. Let's not miss with a good thing.
Okay, Alex, well, what we'll do is you can go, we'll have access to watch the webinar again. We'll put it on our website in the next week or so. And so you can always just go and re-watch it from a recorded perspective, okay?
You know, while I've got you on the line, I beg your pardon. I did submit a question when I filled in the registration form, but I'm really sort of wondering, since COVID-19, how is this going to impact on business development for persons with disability, for job creation from home? Is the digital village infrastructure going to get beefed up? Maybe I'm just talking pie in the sky here, but I think it's a brilliant opportunity to showcase the abilities of persons with disability to work.
Yeah, Alex, I couldn't agree with you more. I really couldn't agree with you more. If ever there was a time to start tapping into the skills out there of persons with a disability from a business owner, a business development and employee perspective, now is the time to invest in doing that, because I think that, as you said, it's a great leveler, and it's a great, a lot of the barriers that have prevented inclusion have now been mitigated because of these new ways we're exploring to do business. We just need to make sure that in all of our future strategies that we are including that the government and corporates who are supporting the supply chain all give cognizance to the fact, and don't lose sight of the fact that persons with a disability need to continue to be supported in their efforts to be able to compete in the economy.
Because now inadvertently they've short-circuited reasonable accommodation. If we can prove that Android is the way to go, yeah.
Yeah,
but
absolutely. A lot of the concerns are no longer valid.
I think, yeah, that's basically my contribution.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi.
Hi, it's Srini Naidu here. Thank you very much for this discussion webinar. Very exciting. I just wanted to pose a sort of question. Odin seems like a very powerful tool, and it will assist both employers and employees in determining how they move forward. But the thing that worries me is whether it's going to be a cop-out for companies to be less involved in the continuous inclusivity type of drive.
Yeah.
You indicate also that from a social welfare and a corporate perspective, disability tends to get shifted lower down the scale with this time.
Yeah.
So how do we use governance to actually make sure companies still comply at the levels or exceed those levels without looking for these sort of ways to brush that off?
I do think that in my experience, a lot of companies have the complete will. They really want to become inclusive, but the problem is that they're circling this bait ball. They don't quite know how to go about doing it. And a lot of the pushback that we get from the line managers and from the stakeholders in the company is that they feel that they're not equipped enough with the knowledge of how to build an inclusive culture. So the reason why we actually developed Odin from the beginning was to be able to say, you know what, you don't need to panic, because this is a tool that makes you the expert. So your line manager's concern about, well, I don't know how to handle somebody with a disability. Well, they've now got access to that information, but they've also got access to an individual who is skilled and equipped to be able to give them unique support and advice. What's also important about this is that Odin allows you to track your progress against predetermined benchmarks. So in other words, if you want your company to be aware of the ongoing, you want to continue with your disability awareness training, messaging and communication and creating knowledge out there, we can track who is being trained, how often they're being trained, which divisions are not actually committing to the training. We can make sure that the right communication messaging templates are used. We can share best practice between different divisions and different companies. So the knowledge is there, and basically it's the answer to companies that are saying, well, look, we know we've got to do it from a compliance point of view. We've got a lot of shortcut available options to us, which are not being sustainable and they're not working for us. So we understand we have to change our culture towards a more inclusive culture, but we're nervous to do it because we don't really know how to do it. And that's where Odin steps in and says, you know what, we know you're limited for time and resources. We know you're not an expert in this. This system can help you. And then there should be no more excuses as to why you can't continue to change and transform the culture. Does that answer your question?
Yes,
so,
no, thank you. If I can have just one more. So I work for a company called Pragma, and they're very big on transformation and inclusivity.
Okay.
And you know, is this system a subscription system, or is it available to everyone?
It is a subscription system, but it's a really cost-effective one. But Srini, what I'll do is I'd invite you to go and have a look at the Odin website, but also just to email me, or we'll email you afterwards, and then we can set up a one-on-one and I can just talk through some of the features and answer some of your questions. But it definitely is designed for organizational support, and it's a subscription based, but it's a really, really budget respecting subscription.
Please do call me. I'll really appreciate that.
Okay, we'll do. Any other questions?
Can I just have one more question? I don't mean to monopolize anybody's time, but once we've dealt with the technical infrastructure, what are we going to do around the paradigm shifting, particularly in South Africa, where the only means to employment, especially in corporate sector where I come from, is learnership.
Yes.
Are we going to move away from that sort of constant childing of disabled adults and just increase the youth limit? So, am I being inappropriate with this question? You know?
No. I'm very well known to speak out about. Look, learnership certainly have a lot of value to add. And there are a few service providers that I work with that are really committed to doing the process correctly so that it results in absorption and proper upskilling and a proper entry into the economic, the career market. But there are a lot that are doing it very unscrupulously and are having absolutely no impact. And I know amongst our candidates with a disability, the word learnership is becoming a real swear word. So I understand what you're saying. I will tell you that I think that a lot of companies who've gone for the shortcut, quick fix, outsourced learnership where the person doesn't really get any experience, they're realizing that retention has become a huge problem, that loyalty to the learnership program has become a questionable, and that it's not a sustainable solution anymore. So in my experience, companies almost have to go through the journey because they need to know what doesn't work before they can move towards what does work. And things like our supported bursary management program and those sort of initiatives are starting to take over from a lot of your learnerships that are not done correctly. So we too are on the same fight against that. And I think that there has been more and more organizations are noticing that this traditional way we've been doing learnerships hasn't been done correctly. But a lot of learnership service providers that I've personally dealt with have also recognized this and are wanting to move away from that model to a more empowering and upskilling based model. So, yeah, in reality, we're going to see massive job losses right now. In reality, the entry into permanent employment for a lot of persons with a disability is not going to happen. And so in reality, a lot of persons with a disability are saying, well, we'll take the learnership until something better comes up because at least I'm eating.
Austin answered, but by the same token, morally and morale boosting, you don't want to be almost 40 years old and still have to write your matric over and over again. And that's a big part of the problem. And I think recruiters and labor brokers need to be workshopped around that in terms of sensitizing, you know.
For sure.
But maybe that's just me angling for work as a trainer.
Alex, I will tell you, we are going to be having another webinar, which is going to be on precisely this topic. So I'll definitely invite you to that. And I think it's something that's very valid that we will be covering in one of our future programs that we'll be running. Just watch out on our website because we are going to be posting all the different topics of webinars that we will be assigning dates to, and we're inviting you to join.
I'm going to tell you, pop it on Facebook and everybody can see it, yeah?
I will do as well. Don't worry, we've got a very active Facebook site, so it will be out there.
Much appreciated. Thanks very much.
Such a pleasure. Any other questions? I know we've run horribly over time, so I just want to double check if there's any other questions.
Can you hear me, Lisa?
Yes.
Jeremy.
Hi, Jeremy. How are you?
Hello. Yes, well, how are you? Thank
Very
you for
good.
the day. Been great. So I'm out in the streets a lot in my wheelchair. I've got a free wheel, and that's my exercise and so on. And what worries me at a more national level is that there isn't an effective campaign to make streets of mainly the urban centres accessible. I mean, some of it's just atrocious. I mean, my city bus in Cape Town is fantastic. But you get off, for example, in Long Street, and if you go left or right, you've got a massive pavement to jump off. So, and if you think of something like the treatment action campaign, which was much more of a binary situation, lobbying or activism will only work if it's done on a broad scale and it's done at a national level. Can do it at a local level. And I just wondered if you're involved in anything in that. Anything around that? I know Ari does his part. I see he was on the list.
Yes,
yes. List, but I just get frustrated about it actually because I haven't got the time and the wherewithal to do something like that. Yeah. But
Jeremy, I will tell you, again, I'll message you afterwards. We don't personally get involved in that hands-on. Again, our focus is a lot to do with workspace, but we do have a lot of networks that are more involved in that dynamic, which I can put you in touch with. But I also just want to tell you, you know, I was doing a disability awareness workshop at a conference in Amsterdam about a year and a half ago for the Sapariba diversity conference. And so I was zooting around Amsterdam in my wheelchair, which is now completely an accessible city because of bicycles. So the reality is that they'd accidentally built a really accessible city for wheelchair users because of the need to have bicycles in the city. And, you know, it was really quite interesting. But it was a fantastic example to show how easily and cost effectively it can be done. The only reason why it's not is because it's not front of mind. And we have a Buildings Regulations Act in South Africa that specifies how it should be done. Our problem is monitoring and implementation of that, which is not an uncommon frustration. But Jeremy, I will, if I could ask you to pop me an email so I've got your details, we'll have you on the register. I will send you some information afterwards and see if I can point you in the right direction. But there is a huge need, I agree.
Okay, I just wanted to mention quickly, Stellenbosch is a client of mine, which I do work in the universal access field.
Yeah.
They want to decongest the town of vehicles because there's just too many vehicles. So there's a group of cyclists and they've got a non-motorized transport working group. And it is such a mission to get the municipality to make the necessary adjustments to the streets so that students and everyone can use bicycles, which is perfect. Stellenbosch is a flat town.
Yes,
so
I know.
It's so functional, and they tried it in Cape Town, this didn't work. So it's a cycling is part of it, but it's a huge problem. It really is.
Do you know, again, I think it takes me back to my first point I made in the beginning of the webinar that really said, never is it a lack of ability to make an accommodative shift. It's completely a lack of motivation and will. And that speaks volumes. There is no reason logistically why the municipality can't get stuck in and do what you need to get done. So there's no excuse for it, and that fighting needs to be louder. I always say it would be great if we had a couple of the municipality heads donate a leg to the cause, and so live the reality, because you'd see motivation shift quite quickly.
Thank you very much, Lesa. It's been a great session.
Lesa?
Yes.
Lesa, Lydia here.
Hi, Lydia.
Hello, everybody. I think for
it's
me,
Lydia. Hello.
Yes, Lydia. I think for me, part of the challenge is how do we build a campaign around the whole COVID disability interface, which is not about COVID and how it is or isn't being catered for in terms of the provisions for disabled people, but showing these where the sector has for years been campaigning, asking for certain things, explain, and it was too much trouble, it was too expensive, it was too this, it was too that, and suddenly it's become the way of life. Part of a campaign to say that, you know, it's about getting to the end point, different ways being allowed and it being structured. So how do we really get a campaign around being able to, as we are in the situation, showing up those things so that we don't just revert back to what we had, and that we actually maintain some of the critical adjustments that was now made that has been impossible for the past 50 years. Thanks.
Yeah, Lydia, I agree wholeheartedly with you, and I think it calls for a very cheeky approach, to be honest. What I'm wanting to put together, and in fact I'll be chatting to you shortly about it as well, is I'm wanting to put together, you know, all of these videos are coming up and being sent around to say, this is how we wash our hands, this is how we do things differently. We need one to say, in a nutshell, well, look how easy it is when the motivation is real. No more excuses, no more reasons why. You know, you will be held accountable. So we need to start putting together, basically what I've tried to present in this webinar is around saying, now is the time to recognize the value of disability to the economy. And we've shown that all of our objections to this are not valid, because we've actually, in a month, we've removed so many of the barriers that we've been asking to be removed for years. So there are no more excuses. Now is the time to include this in the way. I mean, the president spoke last night about we're not going to do things the same way. We're going to use this as an opportunity to do things differently. Well, live the credo. This is what we want. So I think that we need to start getting the messaging out there, not necessarily from one particular lobby group, but everybody needs to start sharing through all your social media platforms. And then we need to identify those channels within government to be able to have those heart-hitting conversations. You know, you said we're going to do the world differently. There's huge talk at the moment around the impact of COVID on disability. So it's not that you're not aware of it. So now let's start building it in. But I think that it's definitely a conversation we have to have, is to say, well, what is our strategy of attack to get that message out there and to start putting it in the spotlight so that people who backtrack from it are noticed.
Could we possibly get the TV people involved, like a mini Big Brother program showing how disabled people actually live?
We certainly can. I'm quite excited about the idea of maybe holding another Zoom meeting with, perhaps if you want to just send us your name and details if you're interested in picking up this conversation in a different meeting forum, then it might be a nice idea for us to put our heads together to say how we're going to formulate this concept. Do you agree there, Alex and Lydia and Jeremy?
100%.
Yeah. I'm going to have to call this webinar to a close, but I really, as I say, I would like to pick up the conversations with some of the points that have been raised in individual or separate meetings after this. Would everybody, if you could, I could ask you just to pop me a mail if you're interested, and then we can set it up directly. I'd really enjoy that and see what we can do there.
Definitely. Lydia, it's nice to hear your voice again, I have to say.
Thanks, Amal. Same here.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Thank you. No, I just want to say thank you, Lesa. But I've got one point to make, and that is that COVID has shown us how big the inequality gap actually is. So I fear that there's going to be much more government focus and energy and money going into that, and then disability becomes less important, which is why we need to be more, more active in making our point for whatever it may be, because one side doesn't fit all with disability. But from my side, it would be access, because I'm out on the roads, but that's a point that I think we mustn't lose sight of.
Yeah, I think, depending on where our particular disability inclusion agenda is lying, whether it be in inclusive education or inclusive infrastructure or business, we all have to be able to tackle it from a multi-pronged approach to get this message across. I think it definitely, in the webinar, I did raise one of my concerns being the fact that disability inclusion is going to drop down to the bottom of the priority list again. And if we're all sharing resources from a pot that's now in huge demand, then once again, budgets are going to be cut when it comes to the whole disability dynamic, and we need to stop that from happening. So there's a lot of lobbying work to do. There's a lot of voice and pointy finger exercises to go on here. But what I do think it needs to be backed with is we need a fundamental, no matter which direction you're coming from, there has to be a recognition that people with a disability have value to bring to our economy, either as a consumer or as a family member of a consumer or as an employee. We have value to bring to the economy, and therefore it's a good long-term investment to recognize and include in our strategies going forward this demographic. We can't keep seeing disability as a charity-based drain on our resources. We have to start to recognize its value, and we have to start including it in our strategies going forward because of this value that it has to bring. That's the reality, especially in times where resources are lean and they have to stretch very far. If it doesn't have value, it doesn't get priority. It's not right, but it's life.
Thanks, Lesa. Good point.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right. So if there's no other questions, as I say, you're welcome to continue to converse with me via email and to reach out to me directly if you have any questions. And we are going to be running a whole lot of other webinars. So if you just watch out for our website, and we'll also be obviously advertising them to you. But we really would like to engage with you. And in terms of, we've put together a schedule for the next, I think it's the next 8 or 9 webinars that we're going to be running. But if any of you feel that there's other topics that aren't on there that you think are quite pertinent and you would like to run one, you're welcome to just pop me a mail, and we can certainly do that and tap in. We'd like to be flexible in terms of what information we're getting out there. But thank you so much for your times. And Dims, I'm so sorry, your hands must be exhausted. And I'll definitely owe you a bottle of gin as soon as our restrictions are lifted. And thank you very much, EDF, again, for stepping in and assisting us. And thank you, everybody, for participating.
Thank you,
Thanks, Lesa. Cheers, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.